The land of the Apache stretched wide, with tall mountains standing like guards and open valleys where the wind carried the voices of the people. The Apache chief was a man everyone respected and feared. He was strong, tall, and proud. His skin was marked with scars from many battles, and each scar told a story of victory. No man from his tribe or from outside could ever claim to have beaten him in combat. To the Apache people, he was not just a leader, but almost like a symbol of strength itself. The chief had 3 daughters. Each daughter was admired in the tribe, not only because of their beauty, but also because of their character. They were graceful, wise, and carried themselves with dignity. Warriors from far and near often whispered about them, wishing for the chance to marry one of them. But the chief had his own way of protecting his daughters. He believed only the strongest and most deserving man could stand beside them. One day, during a gathering of the tribe, the chief made a bold announcement. His voice rang out strong and firm as he stood before his people. He said, "Whoever defeats me will take my daughters as wives." The people gasped. His words spread quickly like fire through dry grass. It was a daring challenge. Everyone knew how powerful the chief was. Many warriors had tested their luck before in smaller contests, and all of them had been thrown to the ground in defeat. Now, with the chief's declaration, some saw it as a chance to win honor and family, while others laughed nervously, knowing it was nearly impossible. The chief's daughters were silent. They had grown up watching their father win every fight. They loved him, respected him, and they knew how much pride he carried. His challenge made them nervous, but they trusted his strength. They thought no man could ever beat him. Over the next weeks, warriors came forward to try. Young men, full of energy and ambition, stepped into the circle to face the chief. The tribe gathered each time to watch. Some warriors lasted a few moments longer than others, but the result was always the same. The chief threw them down, his strength unmatched, his confidence growing with every victory. The crowd cheered him, and his pride became even greater. As the defeats piled up, whispers began to spread among the people. "No man will ever beat him," some said. "His daughters will remain with him forever," others joked. The chief, enjoying his victories, felt certain that no man alive could defeat him. His challenge was becoming less about marriage and more about proving his own greatness. But then news arrived that changed everything. A white man had entered the Apache land. The people were surprised, even angry. Outsiders were not welcome, and few dared to step into the territory of the tribe. The stranger was different. He did not carry himself like a lost traveler. He was calm, steady, and seemed to know where he was going. Word spread quickly that this man had heard of the chief's challenge. To everyone's shock, he did not laugh at it. He accepted it. The tribe was stirred with excitement. Some thought it was foolish. How could an outsider, a man who did not grow up among them, hope to defeat the chief? Others were curious, wondering what kind of courage or madness made him accept such a fight. Around campfires at night, people whispered about him. Does he have secret skills? Has he fought great warriors before? No one knew the truth. The chief himself laughed when he heard the news. He stood tall, looking around at his people, and said, "This white man will learn what it means to challenge me. He will regret his decision." His words filled the tribe with both confidence and anticipation. The fight was set, and everyone waited eagerly for the day. The daughters of the chief listened quietly. They had seen many warriors lose, but this was different. This was not just another man from the tribe. This was a stranger, someone from a different world. Curiosity filled their minds. They wondered what he looked like, how he fought, and why he would risk everything against their father. On the day of the fight, the entire tribe gathered in the open field. The sun shone bright, and the dust rose with every step as people crowded around. The chief walked into the circle with confidence. His body was powerful, his eyes full of fire, his presence commanding respect. The people cheered for him, their voices echoing across the land. Then the white man appeared. He was not as tall as the chief, nor as broad. His clothes were simple and his face calm. He did not smile, nor did he show fear. He carried himself with quiet strength, the kind that did not need to shout. As he stepped into the circle, the whispers grew louder. Some laughed at him, saying he would fall in seconds. Others remained silent, studying him carefully. The chief's daughters watched closely. For the first time, they felt a strange tension in their hearts. They had never seen a man look at their father with such steady eyes, without fear or arrogance. The stranger seemed different from all the warriors before him. The chief raised his hand and the crowd went silent. He looked at the man before him and said, "You dare to face me? Then prepare yourself." The white man nodded. He did not waste words. His calmness unsettled some in the crowd. They were used to warriors shouting, boasting, or trembling before the chief. But this man stood as if he had already measured the fight in his mind. When the signal was given, the chief moved first. His steps were strong, his strikes powerful. The ground shook with his force. The white man, however, did not meet strength with strength. He moved lightly, dodging, stepping aside, letting the chief's power flow past him. The people gasped. They had never seen anyone fight the chief in such a way. Blow after blow, the chief pressed harder. The stranger, though, did not panic. His eyes watched every move, every detail, as if he had studied warriors all his life. The daughters leaned forward, their hearts beating fast. Could this man really stand against their father? The fight had only just begun, but already the people felt something different. This was not like the others. This was not going to end in a few seconds. For the first time, the chief faced a man who did not break at the first strike. For the first time, his strength alone might not be enough. And in that moment, the whole tribe realized they were about to witness something they had never seen before. The crowd pressed in closer around the fighting circle, their voices rising with excitement. Dust floated in the air, catching the light of the sun as if nature itself was watching. The chief stood like a mountain, his chest rising and falling as he glared at the white man. He had fought many men before, and each one had fallen quickly. But this time felt different. The stranger moved differently from all the warriors who had come before him. His feet were light, almost silent. His eyes never left the chief, steady and calm. It was as though he was not only watching but also measuring every motion, every breath, every step. This unsettled some of the people watching. They were used to seeing men try to meet the chief's power head-on, only to be crushed. But here was someone who did not fight with pride or anger. Instead, he fought with patience. The first moments of the fight had already shown something shocking. The chief's blows, though strong and fierce, had not landed as easily as they usually did. Each time the white man shifted his body just enough, letting the strikes pass by without harm. The sound of the chief's fists hitting empty air echoed like thunder, but the stranger did not fall. The people murmured in surprise. Some laughed nervously, saying the stranger was just lucky. Others frowned, their eyes narrowing. Could this outsider truly stand against the chief? The daughters of the chief sat near the front, their hands pressed together in silence. They had always believed their father was unbeatable. They had watched warrior after warrior fall within moments, but now they saw something new. A man who did not fight with rage, who did not try to prove himself with shouts or noise. He was quiet yet strong in his own way. Their hearts beat faster as they watched, a mix of fear and curiosity stirring inside them. The chief growled, his pride burning. He was not used to being avoided like this. He swung harder, faster, his muscles straining, determined to break through the calm defense of his opponent. The ground shook under his heavy steps, dust rising with each stomp. At last, the stranger moved closer. With quick hands, he deflected one of the chief's strikes, guiding it aside rather than stopping it. The chief stumbled slightly, surprised. Gasps rose from the crowd. No one had ever touched the chief like that in combat before. The chief straightened quickly, his face fierce. He tightened his fists, his eyes blazing with anger. "You will not shame me before my people," he roared. His voice carried across the field, silencing the whispers, but the white man remained silent. He did not answer with words, only with his calm eyes. He was not fighting to shame anyone. He was fighting because he had accepted the challenge and he would see it through. The fight grew more intense. The chief's attacks came like a storm, fast, heavy, and filled with power. The stranger moved like water, flowing around the strikes, letting them pass by. His body bent and twisted at the right moments, his steps quick and sure. The people could hardly believe their eyes. This was no ordinary man. Minutes passed, but the fight did not end. Normally, the chief would have finished his opponent long before. Sweat began to shine on his forehead, something his people had rarely seen. His chest rose and fell more heavily. The white man, though breathing hard, still looked steady. The people's voices grew louder. Some shouted encouragement for their chief, calling for him to end it quickly. Others stood in stunned silence, realizing they were seeing something historic. Never before had their leader faced such resistance. The daughters leaned forward, their eyes wide. The eldest whispered softly to her sisters, "He does not fight like the others. He fights with his mind." Her words carried a truth they all felt. The stranger's strength was not in brute force but in careful thought, patience, and strategy. The chief charged suddenly, hoping to crush the fight with one mighty move. He grabbed for the stranger, his hands like iron claws. But the white man twisted his body and slipped free, spinning behind the chief. In one smooth motion, he pushed the chief forward, making him stumble a few steps. The crowd gasped again. The chief had stumbled, something no one had ever seen. A shocked silence spread through the people. Even the chief's daughters covered their mouths in disbelief. Their father, the great warrior, had been forced off balance. The chief turned quickly, his face red with fury. His pride had been wounded. He roared a sound like thunder and charged again. The white man did not back away. This time he stood firm, meeting the chief's rush with a sharp move to the side and a quick strike to the chief's arm. The blow was not enough to harm him deeply, but it was enough to stop his rush. The crowd erupted with shouts and cries. Some cheered, amazed at the stranger's skill. Others shook their heads, refusing to believe what they had seen. The chief himself stood still, breathing hard, his eyes locked on his opponent. For the first time, doubt flickered in the hearts of the people. Could their leader actually be defeated? Could this white man truly stand where no other had? The daughters exchanged glances, their faces pale but their eyes shining with wonder. They had grown up with the belief that no man alive could touch their father. Yet here, before their very eyes, was a man who fought with courage and intelligence, a man who refused to fall. The fight pressed on, neither man giving up. Dust rose around them as they moved, their bodies twisting, their feet pounding the ground. The sun blazed overhead, making the air heavy and hot. Sweat poured down their faces. The chief's muscles strained with every strike, but the stranger still stood, still ready, still unbroken. The people shouted louder, their voices filling the air. Every move was met with gasps, cries, or cheers. Children clung to their mothers, their eyes wide. Old men shook their heads, whispering prayers. Warriors clenched their fists, feeling both fear and admiration. And in the middle of it all, the chief and the white man fought on, locked in a battle that was no longer just about victory. It was about pride, respect, and destiny. The chief knew he could not allow himself to lose. His entire life had been built on his strength, his reputation as the undefeatable warrior. If he lost now, what would it mean for his people? What would it mean for his daughters? His heart burned with determination. The white man, on the other hand, fought with a different spirit. He was not fighting for pride or glory. He was fighting because he had accepted the challenge. His calmness showed that he did not fear winning or losing. He only cared about giving his best. As the sun began to sink lower, painting the sky with golden light, the fight still raged on. The chief's strikes grew heavier but slower. His arms felt like stone, his breath shorter. The stranger, though tired, still moved with that same strange rhythm, measured, careful, and precise. The people realized something shocking. The chief, their great leader, was beginning to tire. The stranger, though weary, still held strength in his calmness. The daughters of the chief felt their hearts pound. The impossible was happening before their eyes. Their father was being pushed to his limit, and the white man, the quiet, steady outsider, was still standing strong. The fight had not yet ended, but the people could feel it. The tide was turning. The legend of the unbeatable chief was about to face its greatest test. The sun dipped lower in the sky, throwing long shadows across the fighting ground. The Apache people had gathered in a wide circle, their eyes fixed on the two men locked in combat. Dust clung to their skin and filled their throats, but no one moved away. They knew they were watching history, something that would be spoken about for generations. The chief's chest heaved with each breath. His body, strong and muscled, showed signs of strain. Sweat rolled down his brow, dripping into his eyes. His arms felt heavier now, though he forced them forward with the same power as before. He had never fought this long. He had never needed to. Usually by now his opponent would already be lying in the dust, defeated, humiliated. But this stranger, this outsider, still stood tall before him. The white man's face was calm, though his chest also rose and fell with heavy breaths. His movements were slower than before, but they were still precise, careful, and full of purpose. Each time the chief lunged, the white man bent or turned just enough to avoid the strike. Each time the chief tried to grab him, he slipped away like smoke. The crowd's voices rose with each failed attempt echoing through the valley. Whispers spread like wind among the people. "He is weakening," some said. "The chief has never looked this way before," others murmured. Warriors shifted uneasily, their proud leader showing signs of exhaustion. Mothers pulled their children closer while elders shook their heads in disbelief. The chief's daughters sat together, their hearts racing. They had grown up with stories of their father's strength. They had believed no man alive could ever bring him to his knees. Yet here they were, watching an outsider do what no Apache warrior had ever done. Their father's pride, his reputation, his very name was being tested before the eyes of his people. The chief roared and rushed forward again, swinging with all his might. His massive arm cut through the air, but the white man ducked low and rolled to the side. Rising quickly, the stranger struck with the palm of his hand against the chief's ribs. The sound echoed sharply and the chief staggered back. The crowd gasped, some covering their mouths. Never before had anyone landed such a clean blow on the chief. His body stiffened as he straightened, his eyes burning with fury. For a moment, silence fell across the gathering. Everyone knew the chief's pride was wounded more deeply than his body. The chief shouted, his voice shaking with anger, "No man defeats me. Not here, not in front of my people." His words rang like thunder, but there was a hint of desperation behind them. He charged again, swinging wildly, his strikes powerful but less controlled than before. The white man stepped lightly, moving with the rhythm of the fight. He did not answer the chief's roar. He did not need to. His silence was louder than any words. His calmness only made the chief angrier. With a sudden move, the white man struck again. This time he caught the chief off guard, hooking his arm and pulling him forward. The chief stumbled, falling to one knee in the dust. The crowd cried out in shock. For the first time, their leader was down on the ground during a fight. Children clutched their mothers. Warriors looked at one another with disbelief. Elders covered their eyes, unable to watch. The chief's daughters gasped, their hands flying to their mouths. Their proud father, the strongest man they had ever known, was kneeling in the dirt. The chief pushed himself up quickly, his face dark with humiliation. His body shook with rage. He stood tall again, lifting his fists, but his movements were slower now. His shoulders sagged slightly under the weight of exhaustion. The white man did not press forward with arrogance. He simply stood ready, steady, and respectful, waiting for the chief's next move. His eyes were calm, his breathing controlled, as though he had prepared for this moment all his life. The chief attacked again, but his strikes were unbalanced. The stranger dodged, turned, and countered with careful precision. Each time the chief grew weaker, his steps heavier. The people began to murmur again, louder now. "He cannot win," someone whispered. "The stranger is too clever," another said. The chief's pride pushed him forward. Blow after blow, he fought with all the strength left in him. But the stranger used that pride against him, guiding each strike into emptiness. Finally, with a sharp twist, the white man caught the chief's arm and pulled him forward. Using the chief's own weight, he threw him over his shoulder. The chief landed hard in the dust. The ground shook beneath him. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The people froze, their eyes wide, their mouths open. The chief lay on the ground, gasping for breath, his face pressed against the dirt. The white man stepped back, giving him space. He did not gloat. He did not raise his arms in victory. He simply stood, waiting. The respect in his eyes was clear. He had come to fight, not to humiliate. The chief groaned and pushed himself up once more, but his body trembled with the effort. His muscles, once so full of power, now screamed with pain. His breath came in short gasps. He looked into the eyes of the stranger and saw no fear, no arrogance, only strength and patience. The people began to understand. The stranger had not come only with skill, but with wisdom. He had not tried to overpower the chief. He had outlasted him, using his own strength against him. The chief's pride, his greatest weapon, had become his greatest weakness. The chief's daughters felt tears welling in their eyes. They loved their father, respected him deeply, but they could not deny what they saw. The stranger had done what no one else could do. He had shown not only courage but also honor. With one final effort, the chief charged once more. His fist swung, his body pushed beyond its limits. The stranger sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and twisted. With a swift motion, he brought the chief to the ground again, this time holding him firmly pinned. The crowd erupted in cries of shock. Their leader was on the ground, held fast by the stranger. The chief struggled, but his strength was gone. His chest heaved, his arms trembled, and finally his body went still. The people watched in silence. The chief, their proud and undefeated leader, had been beaten. His words from weeks before echoed in everyone's minds. "Whoever defeats me will take my daughters as wives." The white man released his hold and stepped back, his face still calm. He waited, giving the chief the dignity to rise on his own. The chief lay in the dust for a moment longer, breathing heavily. Slowly he pushed himself up, his face filled with both shame and realization. The crowd whispered among themselves, their voices carrying both awe and confusion. The chief's daughters sat frozen, their hearts torn between love for their father and the undeniable truth of what had just happened. For the first time in his life, the chief had been defeated. And the man who had done it was not one of his own people, not a rival warrior, but an outsider, a white man. The people knew the fight was over. The question now was not who had won, but what the chief would do next. The ground was silent after the chief's fall. The great warrior, who had stood undefeated for so many years, was now sitting in the dust, his chest heaving as sweat rolled down his face. Around him his people stared in disbelief. Children clung to their mothers. Warriors folded their arms tightly across their chests, and the elders shook their heads slowly. None of them had ever imagined a day when their leader would be brought low. The chief's daughters sat close together, their hands trembling. Their father had always been their shield, their hero, the man who stood taller than all others. Yet now he had been humbled before them. Their hearts hurt for him, but at the same time they could not deny the truth. The stranger had earned the victory. The white man stood nearby, his body steady though clearly tired from the long fight. He breathed heavily but did not show pride or arrogance. He did not raise his arms in triumph, nor did he shout to claim victory. Instead, he looked at the chief with respect, as if honoring the strength and spirit of the man he had just defeated. Slowly, the chief rose to his feet. Dust clung to his clothes and his arms shook slightly, but he stood tall once more. His eyes scanned the crowd, then turned to the stranger. His voice was heavy, deep, and filled with the weight of his promise. "You have defeated me," he said, his words echoing through the silent circle. "And I am a man of my word. I said that whoever defeats me will take my daughters as wives. Today, you have earned that right." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The people looked at each other in shock. The daughters froze, their eyes wide. Though they had grown up knowing their father's words, they never truly believed the day would come when he would have to keep them. The chief looked at his daughters, his face filled with sadness. He loved them more than life itself, but his honor demanded he keep his word. His people had heard his challenge, and they had watched his defeat. To break his word now would mean losing the respect of his tribe. But before anyone could speak further, the stranger lifted his hand. His voice, calm and steady, broke the silence. "I did not fight you for your daughters," he said simply. "I did not fight for marriage or for pride. I fought because you gave a challenge and I accepted it. But I will not claim what is not freely given." The people gasped again, but this time in surprise rather than shock. Warriors who had once laughed at the stranger now looked at him with new eyes. He had the chance to take what many men dreamed of, yet he refused. Instead, he spoke with dignity and respect. The chief's daughters looked at each other, their hearts touched by his words. They had expected him to demand his prize, to boast of his victory. Instead, he showed restraint, choosing honor over desire. For the first time, they saw not just a fighter, but a man of true character. The chief narrowed his eyes, studying the man closely. He had seen many warriors in his life, men who sought glory, land, or family through force. But this man was different. He had fought with patience, won with intelligence, and now spoke with honor. Slowly, the chief's anger softened, replaced by a deep respect. "You surprise me," the chief said, his voice quieter now. "Most men would claim what I promised. Yet you refuse. Tell me, stranger, what is it that you seek?" The white man paused for a moment, then answered. "I seek respect. I seek to live in peace, to be judged not by where I was born but by the strength of my actions. I do not want wives given by force. If love and respect are to come, they must come freely." His words carried through the crowd and silence followed. The people looked at him differently now. He was not only a fighter, but also a man with wisdom. His victory no longer seemed like a humiliation to their chief, but like a lesson meant for all. Over the days that followed, the stranger remained among the Apache. At first, some were suspicious, watching him closely, but little by little he began to earn their trust. He hunted alongside their warriors, bringing back food to share. He worked with their builders, helping repair shelters and carry heavy loads. He showed kindness to children, speaking gently and playing with them in the dust. Slowly, he became more than an outsider. He became part of their daily life. The chief's daughters watched him carefully during these days. They saw how he treated people with fairness, how he never boasted of his strength, how he carried himself with quiet dignity. The eldest daughter in particular found her heart stirred. She had grown up surrounded by warriors who shouted of their victories, who demanded respect loudly. Yet this man who had defeated her father asked for nothing and gave much. The chief himself also observed quietly. At first he felt shame each time he looked at the stranger, but as the days passed, his shame turned into pride. He had been defeated, yes, but not by arrogance or cruelty. He had been defeated by a man who understood honor, and in that defeat he had learned a lesson. Strength is not only in muscles and strikes, but also in patience and humility. One evening, as the fire burned low and the stars filled the sky, the chief spoke to his people. His voice was steady, filled with both strength and humility. "My people," he said, "we have seen something great. For many years I believed no man could defeat me. I believed that only brute strength made a warrior worthy. But this man has taught us otherwise. He has shown us that wisdom, respect, and restraint are greater than anger. I gave my word that my daughters would be given to whoever defeated me. Yet this man has chosen honor over desire. He has chosen respect over greed. And for that, he has won something greater than victory. He has won our trust." The people murmured in agreement. Many nodded, their respect for the stranger growing deeper. The chief turned to his daughters then. His face was soft, his voice gentle. "I will not force you," he said. "The choice is yours. If you see in this man a future, if you see in him respect and love, then you may choose. If not, he will remain our brother and ally." The daughters looked at each other, their eyes shining with emotion. For the first time, they were given the freedom to choose. And for the first time, their hearts leaned toward a man who had proven himself not through pride but through humility. The eldest daughter rose slowly, her steps graceful but steady. She stood before her father, then turned to the stranger. Her voice, though quiet, carried across the circle. "I choose him," she said, "not because he defeated my father, but because he has shown honor. He has shown patience, and he has treated us with respect. This is the kind of man I wish to walk beside." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices rising into the night sky. The people celebrated not only the union but also the lesson they had learned. True greatness is found not in power alone, but in character. The chief, though humbled, felt a deep sense of peace. He placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder and nodded to the stranger. "You have earned my respect," he said. "You are no longer an outsider. You are one of us." The stranger bowed his head, accepting the chief's words with quiet humility. And so the story that began with pride and challenge ended with honor and unity. The chief had been defeated, but in his defeat, he and his people had gained something greater. A bond of respect, a new lesson in strength, and a future built not on power, but on trust. The days after the great fight felt different in the Apache village. The people still talked about what they had witnessed, their voices filled with awe. For many years, the chief had stood undefeated, a man whose strength was feared and admired across the land. But now their memories carried the image of the moment when he had fallen. At first there had been shock, even sadness, but with time, something else began to grow. Respect for the stranger who had defeated him with such honor. The white man, who once walked into the Apache territory as an outsider, now walked among them as a brother. He had entered their world with quiet strength, and after proving himself, he remained without arrogance. Each day he rose early, helping with hunting or working alongside the men who built shelters. He joined in caring for the horses, fetching water, and guiding the young boys who wanted to learn. His presence began to feel less like that of a stranger and more like that of family. The chief watched all of this closely. Though he had felt the sting of defeat, he also felt a quiet pride rising in his heart. He saw how his people respected the outsider, not because he had beaten their leader, but because of the way he carried himself afterward. The chief understood that strength alone would not have won the hearts of his people. It was the stranger's humility and respect that had done so. The chief's eldest daughter, who had chosen the white man, walked beside him often. Their bond grew each day, not from a battle but from kindness and understanding. She learned about his life, about the places he had seen before he came to them. He listened to her stories of the tribe, of the traditions and the songs she had known since childhood. Their worlds were different, but their respect for each other built a bridge between them. The younger daughters also grew curious about him. They asked questions, sometimes playfully testing his patience, but he answered them with warmth. He treated them as family, never as prizes to be claimed. The girls respected him for that, and they began to smile more freely in his presence. In time, the people no longer called him an outsider. They gave him a place in their stories, a place in their hearts. The fight that had once seemed like a humiliation became something else, a lesson that strength comes in many forms. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in colors of fire and gold, the tribe gathered around the great fire. The chief stood, his figure outlined against the glowing flames. His people fell silent, their eyes fixed on him. "My people," he began, his voice steady but soft. "We have lived through a day that none of us will forget. I was defeated and my pride was shaken. But in that defeat I found wisdom. This man came to us as a stranger. He stood against me with courage, but more than that, he showed honor and victory. He asked for nothing and he gave respect to us all. This is a lesson for every warrior here. Strength is not only in fists or in battle. True strength is in the heart that chooses respect over greed and patience over pride." The people nodded, their faces lit by the firelight. The chief's words touched them deeply. For many years they had followed him because of his unmatched power. Now they followed him because of his wisdom too. The stranger, sitting beside the chief's daughter, listened quietly. He did not smile proudly, nor did he bow his head low. He simply accepted the chief's words as one man to another, with gratitude and humility. The tribe began to celebrate, not with grand feasts or endless shouting, but with songs and dances that honored courage and unity. Drums beat steadily as men and women danced in circles, their voices rising to the sky. Children laughed, running around the fire, while the elders watched with contentment. The chief's daughters joined the dances, their movements graceful, their laughter ringing through the night. The eldest often glanced at the stranger, her heart full of peace. She knew she had chosen well, not because of a fight, but because of the kind of man he was. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the story of the great fight began to spread beyond the tribe. Visitors who came from other places heard whispers of a white man who had defeated the Apache chief. But they also heard the more important part of the story, that he had chosen honor over greed and respect over pride. Soon the tale became more than just a story of battle. It became a story of character. The chief himself carried the memory of his defeat not as shame but as a reminder. Each time he looked at his people, he knew they had learned something valuable. He no longer saw his defeat as the end of his strength, but as the beginning of greater wisdom. He understood that a leader is not only the one who wins every fight, but also the one who can accept lessons, even from loss. The stranger continued to live among the Apache, and though some still called him the outsider when they spoke quietly, most no longer thought of him that way. He was part of them now, bound not by blood but by respect. He shared their meals, their songs, and their struggles. He fought beside them when danger came, proving again and again that his heart was loyal. Years later, when people told the story around fires, they did not only speak of the chief's fall, they spoke of how the chief kept his word, how the stranger refused to take what was not freely given, and how respect built bridges where pride once built walls. Children listened wide-eyed, learning that bravery was not just about fighting, but also about how a man lived after the fight was done. The chief's daughters grew into women, each making her own choices. The eldest walked proudly with her husband, the stranger who had once been doubted and mocked. Together they raised their own children, teaching them both the ways of the Apache and the wisdom the stranger carried from his past. Their home was filled with stories, laughter, and lessons that combined two worlds into one. The chief grew older, his hair turning silver, his steps slower. But his heart remained strong, filled with pride not only for his past victories but also for the future he had helped shape. When he looked at his people, he saw a tribe that had grown wiser because of one fight, one defeat and one man's honor, and so, The words that had once been spoken in pride, "Whoever defeats me will take my daughters as wives," were remembered differently. They were no longer just a boast of strength. They became the beginning of a story that taught humility, respect, and unity. Travelers who heard the tale carried it far and wide, telling it in towns and camps across the land. Some told it as the story of a chief's defeat. Others told it as the story of a white man's courage. But among the Apache themselves, it was remembered as a story of honor, a story that showed the true meaning of strength. The chief, though once unbeaten, became remembered not only for his victories, but also for the wisdom he gained in loss. And the stranger, once an outsider, became part of their story forever. The fire of that day never died. It lived on in the hearts of the people, in their songs, and in the lessons they passed to their children. In the end, the story was not about who was the strongest. It was about who carried the greater strength inside, the strength to respect, to honor, and to choose peace over pride. And that is how the tale of the Apache chief and the stranger was remembered, not as the day the chief was broken, but as the day his people grew stronger.